It began with a quiet hypothesis, one scribbled in the margins of a notebook during a late-night conference in a dimly lit university hall. The question was mundane enough. What happens to a body in the moments, hours, and days after death? Not the poetic musings of philosophers or the vague assurances of priests, but the raw mechanical truth muscle twitches, bacterial blooms, the slow collapse of cells into chaos. Science had mapped much of it already, but there were gaps, stubborn little shadows in the data that refused to align with textbooks. So they decided to watch. Not with scalpels or microscopes, but with eyes unblinking and mechanical, a camera, sealed inside a coffin, staring at the dead. The experiment was approved with surprising ease. A small team, 3 biologists, a forensic pathologist, and an engineer secured funding from a private institute obsessed with the fringes of human biology. They chose a simple pine box, unadorned, the kind used for paupers or unclaimed bodies. The camera was a marvel of modern design, compact, heat-resistant, with a lens that could pierce the pitch-black interior, and a battery life measured in weeks. They mounted it to the lid's underside, angled downward, its tiny red light the only spark of life in that wooden void. The body was donated an elderly man, no family, no name beyond a medical ID number etched into the paperwork. He died of natural causes, a heart that simply stopped, leaving his tissues pristine for their study. They buried the coffin in a controlled plot, a patch of earth behind the institute's lab, rigged with sensors to monitor temperature, humidity, oxygen levels. The camera fed its footage to a server via a thin, armored cable snaking up through the soil. For the first day, the team watched the feed in shifts, sipping coffee and jotting notes. The body lay still, as expected. The skin paled, the chest sank slightly as trapped air escaped, and the eyes left open by design clouded over like frosted glass. Decomposition began its predictable march. A faint sheen of moisture as bacteria woke in the gut, a subtle bloating that pressed the man's shirt against his ribs. It was textbook, almost boring. They adjusted the camera's focus, logged the timestamps, and waited. On the second night, something shifted. The lead biologist, a wiry woman named Clara, was alone in the observation room when the footage flickered. She leaned closer, squinting at the grainy screen. The body's left hand, resting limp across its stomach, seemed different. She rewound the feed, frame by frame. At 2:17:43, the fingers were splayed, pinky brushing the shirt's hem. At 2:17:44, they'd curled inward, the knuckles bent like a claw. She blinked, chalked it up to rigor mortis, a delayed contraction, nothing more. She marked it in the log and moved on. But an hour later, the hand twitched again. Not a slow tightening, but a jerk, sharp and deliberate, as if swatting a fly. Clara froze, her pen hovering over the page. She replayed it, slowed it to 1/10 of normal speed. The motion was unmistakable. A spasm, yes, but too precise, too alive. She called the team in. By dawn, they were all there, crowded around the monitor, faces pale under the fluorescent hum. The forensic pathologist, a gruff man named Elias, insisted it was gas pockets of methane or carbon dioxide shifting the limbs as they built up in the tissues. The engineer checked the camera's stability. It hadn't moved, hadn't glitches. They watched in silence as the hours ticked by. At 9:12, the body's head tilted. Not much, just a few degrees to the right, but enough to make the clouded eyes stare directly into the lens. The room went quiet, save for the hum of the server. Elias muttered about spinal contractions, but his voice lacked conviction. Clara zoomed in. The eyes hadn't changed, still milky, still dead, but their alignment felt intentional, like a gaze. By the third day, the movements grew bolder. The right arm slid off the chest, thumping softly against the coffin's floor. The legs bent at the knees, then straightened, the heels scraping the wood with a sound the microphone barely caught a faint, rasping hiss. The team argued. Elias clung to science, post-mortem reflexes, anaerobic bacteria flexing muscle fibers. Clara wasn't so sure. She pulled up older studies cases of corpses shifting as decay warped their frames, but nothing matched this rhythm, this strange choreography. The body wasn't rotting fast enough to explain it. The bloating was minimal. The stench, monitored by a gas sensor, barely detectable. It was as if death had paused, holding the man in some liminal state, neither alive nor fully gone. On the fourth night, the impossible happened. The body sat up, not gradually, not with the stiffness of rigor, but in one fluid motion, back straight, head lolling slightly as if waking from a nap. The camera caught it all, the shirt creasing, the hands bracing against the coffin's sides. The eyes, those damn eyes, fixed on the lens. The team didn't speak. They didn't breathe. The server whirred, logging every frame. The man stayed upright for 6 minutes, then slumped back down, limbs splayed like a marionette, cut loose. The footage looped on the screen, a silent accusation. Elias stormed out, muttering about hoaxes. Clara stayed, staring at the still image of the upright corpse, its face oddly serene. What came next defied every rule they knew. The movements didn't stop, they multiplied. Fingers tapped rhythms on the wood. The jaw dropped open, then snapped shut, teeth clicking in the dark. The chest rose and fell, not breathing. Not quite, but mimicking it. A hollow parody of life. The team dug up the coffin on the 6th day, expecting answers. They found the body intact, skin still pale but pliable. No stench, no worms. The camera was still rolling its red light steady. And then, as they stood over the open box, the man's hand reached up not toward them, but toward the sky, fingers stretching as if grasping for something just out of reach.